What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'm going to talk about some injuries that occurred to our center backs over the weekend for the U.S. men's national team, and a couple of bad injuries to both Tim Ream and Cater-Vickers. Those two started alongside each other in the only win we had at the World Cup against Iran, and both are two very solid center backs that should be in contention to start for us. Tim Ream, he's been having a very strong season with Fulham, helping them stay up this season and doing more than stay up. They are overachieving. It looks like they don't have a chance to make Europe, but they were in contention for a long time, and they were never really threatened with relegation throughout the season. I actually heard it said that this is probably the best season an American center back has ever had, and I really can't disagree with that. He has had a very good season. He impressed Pep Guardiola, and I think that he's been very good. It's unfortunate that he had an injury. Playing against Guardiola and Man City, he landed really badly on his arm, ended up breaking it, and he will be out for the season. Now, if there's a silver lining to this injury, it's not anything that has to do with his legs. So I assume he will be able to come back. And with his performances this year, you have to imagine that Fulham have to consider keeping him a starter. For a long time, when they bounced in between the Premier League and the Championship, Ream would always drop to the bench in the Premier League, then start again in the Championship. But I think they might end up sticking with him in the Premier League this year because he's been playing that well. And then Cameron Carter-Vickers has been just really solid for Celtic. I think he's the best center back in Scotland probably since Virgil van Dijk, which is like crazy to say, but I really believe that. He's been doing extremely well for Celtic. He's been playing through an injury. It was the injury that kept him out of the U.S. team for the Nations League games in March, and he's been playing hurt this entire time. They just came off a game against Rangers, which is Malik Tillman's Rangers, the only other team in Scotland that is like a really good squad. And he was the man of the match in a clean sheet victory against them in a cup semifinal. And with the league already wrapped up and a cup final that is probably not going to be that difficult for Celtic, they're deciding to just rest Cameron Carter-Vickers for the rest of the season. He's going to be having a surgery on his knee, and he's out for the rest of the year. Now, he might be able to return for the Nations League, but it might not be worth risking that. I think that there might be trying to protect him for a transfer is the reason that he's being shut down for the rest of the year. But both of them are going to be out for the Nations League, so there has to be some new center backs for the U.S. men's national team. My first choice for the U.S. is Chris Richards. He's been my favorite American center back for a long time, and it's not just he plays for Crystal Palace, because when Crystal Palace signed him, I said, as a Palace fan, I'm excited. As a USA fan, I have some reservations because he has not gotten into the team over Mark Gahey or Joaquin Anderson, which was my main concern with him signing there. He's been a backup. He's made one appearance since February, and that's been at right back. And I think that that's been pretty bad for him. He might have to get a move somewhere else. Honestly, even at times when a center back has been injured, James Tompkins has been preferred. So I really think that for Richards, he might want to move elsewhere, but I like having him as a solid backup at Crystal Palace. He's a versatile player. He can help out, cover for fullback, cover at center back. I think he should be playing over Tompkins, but he's still just a backup there, so I think he should be moving on. So him not playing is part of the reason why he wasn't involved in the team in March. He was also dealing with a bit of an injury as well. And things haven't really changed. He is healthy now, but he's not playing a lot. But I think when you look at his talent, I don't think it really matters because he was able to come in and do well for us when he wasn't playing the most before. Even when he was on loan last season, he wasn't getting the greatest amount of playing time. When he was at Bayern, he wasn't playing that much, but he was still able to do well. And when you look at him, I think he has just traits that the rest of the team really doesn't. He's amazing in the air. He can compete physically with anybody in CONCACAF. He's fast enough to do well in a high line, and he's really talented on the ball. And in addition, he can play both a right-sided center back and a left-sided center back. His left foot is good enough to play in that position. So he's just such a solid player for us. And even though he's not playing that much right now, I think that it would be beneficial to start him. I think he's our best option, and especially with the two injuries we have, he should be playing. Miles Robinson is another option for the U.S. He was very good defensively in World Cup qualifying, helping keep a number of clean sheets. And I think that he has shown that he's back in form. He had a very good performance in the Nations League previously. He's been doing well for Atlanta. And he's probably going to get a move abroad pretty soon, so I won't even hold that against him. But on the ball, he's a bit weaker than everybody else that I'm going to be talking about. He really doesn't have the ability to do well when under pressure or make incisive passes when we're playing against top opposition. Now, he's not like Aaron Long, where he's just such a liability, but it's certainly not a strength of his. Now, we could see that improve later in his career if he moves on to a different club, but I think at the moment we have to be knowledgeable of that limitation. But at the same time, he's so strong defensively, similar to Matt Turner. We know his distribution issues, but when you're so much above everybody else as a goalkeeper with your shot stopping, you have to play him. And he might be so far above everybody else that I'm going to be talking about that I'd be willing to start Miles Robinson, certainly with the injuries we have to Tim Ream and Cater-Vickers. And I think that might be my preferred partnership of Chris Richards and Miles Robinson at the current moment. Then we have Mark McKenzie, who I think in theory could be one of our top center backs of the future. But that is in theory because, well, he is an extremely athletic player, like Chris Richards, like Miles Robinson, even more so than a Cameron Carter-Vickers. He has the speed needed to play at this top level. He has the physicality needed. He's good in the air, and on top of that, he's extremely talented on the ball. And like Chris Richards, he's good enough with both of his feet so that he can play that left-sided center back role if we want to put Chris Richards in a preferred right center back spot. But despite all that, it really hasn't translated to good performances with the national team. There was last year's or 2021's Nations League final where he was making mistake after mistake in that game, and we have to keep in mind that he hasn't really taken his opportunities, and you have to hold that against him to some degree. But I think we should remember that in that Nations League final, Tim Ream got destroyed. And when we got him back in form, when he was playing very well, he did a lot better for us. Mark McKenzie, I think, can be a lot better for us. When he was making those mistakes, he wasn't getting consistent playing time for Genk, and he is now. So I think we should definitely consider playing Mark McKenzie because I think those mistakes could be something of the past. We can't just assume that they will be, but if he is beyond those, all of those positive traits that he has translates to him being a top center back. So I think he should definitely be in the team. But in terms of starting him in an important cup competition, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that just yet. And like I said before, with the injuries to Cameron Carter-Vickers and Tim Ream, I think that Chris Richards and Miles Robinson is my preferred center back pairing for the Nations League finals. I think we also have to consider John Brooks returning to the team. There were a lot of players who were frozen out of the squad by Greg Berhalter. It appears that Matt Miazga was one of them, but he was back in the team under Anthony Hudson, so there is a possibility that John Brooks could return. And I think it's obvious why we'd want him back into the team. He started playing consistently with Hoffenheim lately. He's an amazing player on the ball. He's great aerially. And honestly, when he was with the team, I always thought that he was one of our best leaders on the field. Now, that could be false. I mean, he had a falling out with Greg Berhalter, so we can't know that. But just from what I was seeing from the outside, I thought that Brooks was a really good leader for this team. Now he obviously has his issues. He's a very slow player, even when compared to some of our less athletic guys like a Tim Ream or a Walker Zimmerman. With Brooks, it appears to be a pretty big problem. And I think especially with Hoffenheim this season, whenever you watch him play, he's liable to make a big mistake. It's similar to Zach Steffen with Middlesbrough this year, where you'll see a lot of talented moments from him, a lot of good flashes, but every game it feels like there's a big mistake that leads to a goal getting put in and Hoffenheim dropping points. Now he's able to have some really good moments, like being able to limit Bayern to having one goal in a really good game against them. And I think that some of the mistakes he makes are it's because he's trying to do things that other center backs wouldn't be able to, like trying to make a really quick pass that ends up getting stolen. But those mistakes are still happening. And when you add that to his lack of speed, it's hard to see him starting with this group, and he really doesn't have much potential to get better either. So I think when I'm looking at this team, there are three center backs above him currently, and then there are the other two that are injured right now. So I'm not sure if I could justify having John Brooks return to the team, but I think at the moment he's probably fourth on the depth chart of center backs I'd like to have starting. Then there are some other guys just to throw in there. Walker Zimmerman is an option. I really don't think he's that good of a player at an international level. He was able to do pretty well in Concacaf for World Cup qualifying. I think that he got exposed a couple of times against better teams, but he has a certain level to him that I think is acceptable. I wouldn't be mad if he was the fourth center back that we brought, but I don't think that he's good enough to be starting for this team. And I think we really saw that in the World Cup, where his giveaways were very bad against England, gave away the penalty against Wales. And while we were just kind of overwhelmed against the Netherlands, I don't think that's the fault of any player. He wasn't holding his own in that game either. So I don't think there's much of a benefit to bring Walker Zimmerman into this team, aside from if he's a good leader, which, again, like I said with John Brooks, I can't know about. And there's also Eric Palmer Brown and Austin Trusty, who we should be considering as well. But again, I haven't been too impressed with Eric Palmer Brown in this team. Austin Trusty, I feel like I would definitely like to see him as our fourth choice center back, but I don't think he's above Mark McKenzie right now, or certainly not Chris Richards or Miles Robinson. If we bring him, that's certainly good, but I prefer Mark McKenzie right now. But again, I'd be fine with Austin Trusty in this team. And I think we should also just keep in mind that James Sands has been a decent center back, especially in a back three when given that option. So I think we shouldn't rule him out. I'd have him in the squad right now as a midfielder. So just keep that in mind that we'd have extra center back depth with James Sands, even though it wouldn't be ideal to play him. And yeah, that's my opinions on the U.S. center backs right now. With the injuries to Tim Ream and Cameron Carter-Vickers, I'd like to see Chris Richards and Miles Robinson get a go. I'd definitely like to see Mark McKenzie play. If we start Austin Trusty, that'd be fine for me as well. Maybe we should give John Brooks a chance, but in a Nations League final, I'm not sure if we should be doing that. But granted, he was probably our best player or best defender in those Nations League final. He was in the team of the tournament at that last Nations League final. So he certainly was good enough back then, and I believe he should have been in the squad for the World Cup. But at the current moment, it's hard to say. And yeah, I guess that's all I've talked about. See you.